protect California residents. BB guns, as well as pellet guns, are deliberately fabricated to look like real firearms. Consequently, law enforcement officers have an extreme difficulty extinguishing between the real thing and what is fake. These replicas from lethal weapons, especially when officers must make a split-second decision in a very dangerous situation. One of the primary dangers posed by replica guns is that they are used by children as well as young adults who do not comprehend the seriousness of displaying them around unsuspecting law enforcement officers. On October 22nd, just last year, young 13-year-old Anthony Lopez of Santa Rosa was tragically shot by Sonoma County sheriffs when they mistook his plastic airsoft gun for a replica, or I should say, for a real AK-47. In my own district, back in 2010, another 13-year-old boy, young man, Romayent Gomez, was accidentally shot by an LAPD officer. He was playing in the street, dusk. Folks thought there were men out there with actual real guns. LAPD was called in. LAPD came in. They found this young man running all over the place, and young Romayent got scared, unfortunately, and he was told to freeze. He turned around, had a gun in his hand. LAPD officer shot him. Today, he's paralyzed from the neck down. What he actually had was an airsoft gun replica of a 9mm Beretta. So these tragedies don't just occur in Santa Rosa or Los Angeles. They occur all over the state of California, all throughout the country. They are not uncommon. A study by the Department of Justice actually found that there are well over 200 incidences of this kind per year, in which imitation guns are actually mistaken for real firearms. SB199 will require DD and airsoft guns to be produced in distinguishable colors for law enforcement officers. This will give police a real opportunity to easily identify imitation guns for what they really are and avoid these types of tragedies. Realistic imitations do not belong on the streets. They endanger children, teens, as well as law enforcement officers. We believe this is a simple solution. Mr. President, as well as colleagues, I respectfully ask for that.
Debate or discussion on this measure. Senator Evans, followed by Senator Knight.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank Senator De Leon for bringing this issue forward again and for his persistence on this issue and for allowing me to join us here in authoring the bill. As you've heard, the afternoon of October 22nd, 2013, a young man in my own hometown of Santa Rosa, Andy Lopez, was fatally shot by a Sonoma County Sheriff's deputy while he was walking down the street from Santa Rosa. He was carrying an airsoft imitation firearm that closely resembled an AK-47, and Mr. Lopez was simply walking on his way to a friend's house. The sheriff's deputies pulled up behind him, told him to drop the weapon, and no one is quite sure whether he heard the command, but what we do know is that within a matter of just a few seconds, one of the deputies fired 8 shots, hitting Mr. Lopez 7 times, and he was pronounced dead on the scene. And the tragedy has rocked Santa Rosa and Sonoma County to its very core. It actually occurred, these incidents occur almost daily in the state of California, and since this happened, since we held our press conference in Santa Rosa, numerous people, young men, older men, have come up to me and shared their stories of their incidents when they have been encountered by law enforcement because they've been out playing cops and robbers or playing war or whatever in somebody's house, or they've seen a kid walking down the street carrying what looks like a real weapon and they're not sure whether to call law enforcement or not. So these things happen all the time, and they shouldn't. It puts law enforcement at risk, it puts the public at risk, and it puts children at risk. And this bill offers a very simple, common sense solution to put an end to the question of whether or not this is an imitation firearm. This bill will allow law enforcement to arrive on the scene, take a second to look, a split second, because that's all they really realistically have. If that's a real weapon, they need to know that. If it's not a real weapon, they need to know that as well. So this will allow them to make that split second, that we are asking, split second decision that we are asking them to make every single day. A toy should look like a toy. A toy should not get a child killed. A toy should never put a law enforcement officer in a position of killing a child. That is simply unacceptable in our society. We know what the problem is, we know what the solution is, and I ask for my vote on this very simple common sense legislation that will save lives.
members. I rise in opposition to this bill for many reasons, but the first one would be the hesitation factor, and I think I've talked to the author about this several times. In today's day and age, a gun does not look like a gun sometimes. A gun looks like a toy. A toy looks like a gun. I would go with that. But also in today's day and age, a brand new 9mm gun could look like a toy. That's what can happen. That is what happens. So if we're saying that as a police officer, they roll up on a scene and they see a brightly colored gun, they know that that's a toy. That is just not true. It's not true at all. If you look at gun sales today, you will see guns that are different colors. You'll see guns that are not blue steel, that are not black guns. They're different. And so if you're saying that the hesitation factor, because that gun is brightly colored, should change how a police officer performs that call, then you're not thinking correctly. A gun brings a different phase into a police call. There's no doubt about it. But to say that I can make that distinction within a split second and say that is a toy gun, I know that all they can do is shoot me with an airsoft, then I'm okay. That's ridiculous. So I think that what the author is trying to do, and we have had these shootings all over the state. LAPD has been involved in some of these shootings, and some of the other departments up and down the state have been involved in these shootings. I think this is something we should look into. This is not the way to go about this, because this isn't going to change. And are we going to write a bill if a police officer gets shot with a real gun that was painted orange? Are we going to be on this floor saying that police officer should have been shot by that gun because they took that split second to say that that was not a real gun, and yet they're being carried away? I don't know if we'll be writing that bill, but with this bill, it makes it a possibility.
Senator Correa, followed by Senator Wesson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, I wasn't going to get up and speak on this matter, but I just heard a couple of comments that reminded me about a story that I heard from my brother, who was a LAPD officer. And years ago, he counted to me a story about his first time that he actually had to pull out his weapon and use it. And the story, the message I got from him was that essentially a police officer is a judge, jury, and executioner within a split second. You've got to make a quick decision based on what they see in front of them almost immediately. A lot of times, if they don't make that decision correctly, of course, you have a disaster. And if they hesitate, there also may be a disaster. So my question in voting for this measure is, does coloring a toy gun in a bright color help that police officer make that decision? I think it does. I think it does, and I think it will help the police officer make the right decision, which is, see a child, an individual with a brightly colored weapon, what's the police officer going to think they're going to do in that split second? Ask them to vote.
Senator Wesson.
Thank you. I also want to thank the author for taking on this important issue. I think having the prevalence of guns in our community does lead to gun violence, and we need to take preventative measures to really help reduce the loss of life in our community. I do have some minor concerns with the bill, and I think that the author is working toward a resolution. There are some industry recommendations that I think speak to education, speak to the registration process, speak to parental guidance in purchasing these weapons. I think there's another issue. If I were in law enforcement and somebody pointed a brightly painted gun that resembled an AK-47 at me, I think I would take reasonable measures to protect myself, given that the possibility somebody can paint an AK-47 and use it to create havoc in our community.